Namaskaram. Hi, Michael, Ernesto,
Hi.
Jose. Today we have a question that says like this. In the Path of Sri Ramana, Sadhu Om says, it is normal for one who is truly engaged in the practice of self-attention to frequently experience as if one's true nature of absolute self shines at times and then obscures. On such occasions, one will be able to understand very clearly from one's own experience how the world's appearance vanishes and how it again comes into existence. That's a quote from the book. Is he talking about subsiding in laya, or does the world really vanish when a deep vairagya is combined with a strong love to turn within? Does this happen in the advanced stages of practice?
No, it's certainly not. It's certainly not laya. If so long as we are clinging firmly to self-attentiveness, we avoid pramada. Pramada means self-negligence. Pramada can take two forms. One form is when our attention gets diverted by other thoughts under the sway of our vasanas, and it goes outwards. That's one form of pramada. The other form of pramada is falling asleep or subsiding into laya. When we cling to self-attentiveness, so long as we are holding firmly to self-attentiveness, we are balanced between these two. We neither get carried away by thoughts, nor do we subside in laya. If we get carried away by thoughts, or if we subside in laya, that means we have lost a hold on our self-attentiveness. So what he is talking about here is nothing to do with laya. Laya means a temporary dissolution of mind. In self-investigation, so long as we're holding on to self-attentiveness, that laya cannot occur. And if we hold on to the self-attentiveness firmly enough, it will lead to manonasa, which is the permanent dissolution of mind. What he's talking about here is, that is, to the extent to which we are self-attentive, our attention is thereby withdrawn from other things. So when we go deep in this practice, the deeper we go in this practice, the more clearly our own real nature as pure being, I am, alone shines. And other things thereby withdraw into the background, and eventually they will disappear. So when we are deeply absorbed in self-attentiveness, the world, in effect, disappears. It may not disappear completely, but it disappears to a very great extent. It recedes into the background of our awareness, so to speak. And of course, when it disappears completely, then that is the state of pure awareness. But during practice, we can see how the world, as we go deeper within, the world appearance dissolves more and more. The world appearance dissolves along with ego. Of course, it will dissolve completely and permanently only when ego dissolves completely and permanently. But to the extent to which ego subsides as a result of self-attentiveness, the appearance of the world, and the world here means all other things. It includes not only the physical phenomena that make up the physical world, but also the mental phenomena that make up the mental world. All will dissolve or recede into the background to the extent to which we are self-attentive. Is that a clear answer to that question? And does that seem to you to fit with the rest of that passage?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, the thing is that
for those who are watching this, incidentally, this passage occurs in the chapter on the first chapter of the supplement, that is the world and God. In the current edition, that's on page 156, but soon a new version is going to be brought out in which the page numbers will change, because the introduction, which should have been part of the main book, was earlier put in the prefatory section. So once that comes into the main book, all the page numbers will change accordingly. But currently it's on page 156. It may be about 10 pages later in future editions.
So when Sadhu Om says that is, he's talking about the solution to a great extent, not
to a great extent, yes. If the complete dissolution takes place as a result of self-attentiveness, when everything dissolves, obviously ego dissolves, that everything dissolves to the extent that ego dissolves. So when everything has dissolved completely, that is because ego has dissolved completely. And what then remains shining is pure awareness. So as soon as we recognize ourselves as pure awareness, that is, then ego is destroyed forever. That is what can be described as a 180-degree turn. So what he's talking about here is during the practice when we are turning close to 180 degrees, but haven't yet reached 180 degrees.
Yeah, enough to see that there is a correlation between the rising of the first person and the second and third person are rising.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But we
because the solution of mind,
we can observe this at other times. We can observe this at other times. For example, if we sometimes when we're dozing off to sleep, we may for some reason be trying to keep ourselves awake. But we may have some reason we don't want to sleep, so we're trying to keep awake, but the sleep is overpowering us. What usually happens at that time is the waking world begins to dissolve and the dream world seems to take over. So sometimes we seem to be in a state where we're somewhere in between waking and dream. We're still slightly aware of the waking state, but dream mixed up with dream images. Of course, this is not the complete disappearance of world, but we can see at such times how the appearance of the world is mind dependent, and the world seems solid to the extent to which we are attached to the body. That's why when we're dreaming, the dream world seems very real because of the strength of our attachment to a dream body. But as soon as we wake up as soon as we leave that dream and come to this so-called waking state, our identification and attachment to that dream body is severed, and therefore we at once recognize it was just a mental projection. So I'm not saying this is the same, but a little similar to that, the more we cling to self-attentiveness, the more we can see the world. It's very difficult. When we try and put it in words, it fails because the word cannot, but it's almost like the world is disappearing from view. Of course, if we notice the world is disappearing from view, then our attention has slipped away from ourselves towards the world. So, but if we are clinging firmly to self-attentiveness, we will understand in retrospect how, to the extent that we are self-attentive, to that extent the world disappears, the world dissolves, the world appearance dissolves.
That was my next question. Actually, I was going to ask you about if that can be compared to that state in which one is slowly falling asleep, that can lead to pramada, to laya, because you can fall asleep if you are tired or something.
Yes.
But the difference would be in comparison with regards to the text that Sadhu Om is describing here, is that at that very moment that is not due to tiredness, it's just because you are obviously holding on to yourself to a great extent. And the kind of sensation is the same. I mean, the vanishing of the second and third person is kind of the same, but what brings it about is obviously a different reason.
Yes.
What happens if you experience? Is it the same thing that happens if you experience sleeping waking?
Sleeping waking that is what is meant by sleeping waking is our natural state of pure awareness. It's called sleeping waking. That is the Sanskrit term is Jagrat Sushupti. In Tamil, it's sometimes called Nanavu Tuil, which means sleep waking or waking sleep. It's also sometimes called Nanavil Tuil, sleep in waking. Bhagavan uses both terms. That is the state where we are fully awake to our own being and completely asleep to the appearance of the world. That is our natural state. That is what we are moving towards when we are practicing self-attentiveness, but we don't actually experience that that wakeful. We may experience something close to that wakeful sleep, but we don't experience wakeful sleep itself until ego is annihilated. But once ego is annihilated, we will then realize that wakeful sleep is our true state, and there was never a moment when we were not experiencing that. But from the perspective of ego, we are not experiencing it now.
Right. Okay.
That is our
So
real,
ego is like
our real nature. What we actually are is always in the state of wakeful sleep. But
So ego
because
is
we
like
now seem to be ego, we seem to be out of that state.
it feels like it's the wall between sleep and waking. So ego is this hard division between what it calls the waking state and the sleep,
Yes, yes.
the deep sleep in this case.
Sleep is actually our natural state. However, from the perspective of ego in waking and dream, sleep seems to be defective. Firstly, sleep seems to be a temporary state, whereas our natural state is eternal. So that's the first defect in sleep. That is the defect in sleep is that we come out of it again. And secondly, from the perspective of ego, because what shines in sleep is only our real nature. But from the perspective of ego in the waking or dream state, our real nature is seemingly obscured. Our real nature is the pure awareness I am. This is seemingly obscured by ego, which is the false awareness I am this body. So because ego, we can never be aware of our real nature. So we're not aware of our real nature. Because we've now risen as ego, we're not aware of we as ego are not aware of our real nature. Therefore, we cannot recognize what it was that was shiny in sleep, because what is shiny in sleep is our real nature. So just like our real nature, which is shiny even here and now, is seemingly obscured by the superimposition of ego, the same ego is superimposed on our recollection of what was shiny in sleep.
Right. This is why it seems like it seems to the ego that he cannot explain what's in deep sleep.
Yes, ego, as ego, we cannot grasp what was shiny in sleep. What we do know, we are aware of our existence in sleep. We are not aware of our identity in sleep. And when I say we, I mean we as ego in the waking state. We are aware I slept. But what we were in sleep is obscured because it's what we were in sleep is what is shiny even now, but is obscured by the superimposition of ego.
Now, is it obscured by the superimposition of ego as in the vasanas being superimposed on it? Is it ego that is superimposed on it? Is it
ego is superimposed on it. Vasanas are just it is the nature of ego to have vasanas, but there can't be any vasanas without ego. So the primary what obscures our real nature is ego. Ego is what is in the old text is described as avidya, ajnana, maya.
So ego itself is what's laid up on it.
Yeah. That is, ego is maya, and maya is said to have there's said to be two shaktis, two powers of maya. The primary power of maya is what is called abharana. That means obscuring. That is, ego itself is the abharana. The other power is vikshepa. Vikshepa means scattering. So as soon as our real nature is obscured, we become aware of all this multiplicity. That is the scattering. So these are the two essential characteristics of ego. The two defining characteristics of ego is, firstly, as ego, we are always aware of ourselves as I am this body. That is the abharana. Secondly, we are consequently aware of other things. That is the vikshepa.
Right. Right. And so, in other words, observation of things other than ourselves, plus ignorance of ourselves.
Yes, yes. That is, there is no ignorance. What is called ignorance of ourselves is nothing but a mistaken identity. That is sometimes, if you listen to people who give lectures on Vedanta, they'll often say, first there is the, first we have to be ignorant of our real nature, and then only we can make the error of mistaking ourselves to be a body, as if it's two different things, but actually it's one and the same thing. Because what is called ignorance of our real nature is nothing but the wrong knowledge, I am this body.
Right. For someone who doesn't practice Atma-vichara at the time of death, then the obscuring nature of the ego remains.
Yes, yes. Well, ego remains, and the obscuring nature of, I mean, ego is always obscure. The very nature of ego is obscuring.
Thereby a new birth happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the question says if that happens, what Sadhu Om describes there happens in advanced stages of the practice.
Yes, I mean, obviously it's not going to, we may not notice that in the early stages, but the deeper we go in the practice, the clearer what he's talking about here will be to us.
Well, as you say, the important thing, I mean, we don't have to be, obviously, we don't have to keep an eye on what is.
No, if you're watching out for the disappearance of the world, it will never disappear until you fall asleep.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So sleep is a very tricky thing for the ego.
Yes, and this is why there's so much confusion about this subject. This was a topic that came up recently, about 10 days ago. There was, you may have seen it, there was a discussion in which both Swami Sarvapriyananda and I were answering questions. And some of the questions were about our experience in sleep. And I explained that though there are different levels of explanation are given about this, that is, in most of the older texts, it is said that though because people want to know if ego is absent in sleep, how does it come out of sleep again? If ego ceases to exist, how can it come into existence again? So the explanation that is usually given in the Shastras is that though ego is absent in sleep, the vasanas remain, and the vasanas are what give rise to ego. But that is not the explanation Bhagavan gives us, because according to Bhagavan, ego is the root cause. There can't be any vasanas without ego. So Bhagavan gives us a much more refined explanation, which is actually a much more satisfactory explanation. But many people who've read the old texts and whose minds are fixed in those ideas, there's one person that is that video, it was first there for some days, the video that had been live streamed remained on Yussi's website. I mean, Yussi's YouTube channel. Then he edited it and he put another version and took down the live streaming. And I think in the live streaming, there was one person who was commenting, but what I was saying was wrong. But Gaudapada has very clearly said it in Mandukya Karika. So what Gaudapada said is correct. But that is of course, Gaudapada did give a certain explanation, but the explanations that are given have to be according to that, as Bhagavan said, the teaching has to be according to the taught. So the deeper and subtler explanations, sages don't always give the deepest and subtlest explanation. Often they give a more superficial explanation, which is suited to the grasping power of those that they are addressing. Because there's no point in giving the deepest teaching to those who are not ready for them. If we want the deepest teaching, we need to think about the teachings and question them. The more we question them, the deeper and deeper explanations they will give us. So if we're satisfied with the more superficial explanation, they will leave it at that. It's only if we have a very critical, if we consider all these things very critically and question, then they will give us the deeper teachings. I saw this very clearly with Sadhu Om. I was with him for about more than 8 years, 8.5 years or whatever. And as I was able to understand the subject more and more, I was able to ask deeper questions, and he then gave me deeper answers. And sometimes he would give me an answer and I would say, this is really nice. This is far better than anything I've heard before. I mean, a few days later, some visitors will come and we'll be asking him about a similar subject, and he'll be giving a more superficial explanation. And then I'll ask him afterwards. I won't ask immediately, but afterwards I'll say, why, when you gave me this very nice explanation, why do you give them this explanation which isn't really so satisfactory? He said, for you it's not satisfactory, for them it's satisfactory. So when they go deeper in the practice, and then they begin to question these explanations, then only the deeper explanations are to be given.
Right, of course.
So that's why sometimes even Bhagavan will sometimes talk as if he's talking according to the way it's explained in the older text. Because Bhagavan knows some people aren't going to grasp anything more than that. But in other places, Bhagavan says very clearly, sleep is not ignorance. It is your pure state. It's pure awareness in sleep. That's recorded in Maharsha's Gospel, him saying that. And there's a verse in Guru Vachaka Kavai in which he says something to the effect. I can't remember the exact word, but it's something to the effect. When the root cause of all this, namely ego, is removed, then I think he said to call our state of pure awareness that shines in sleep as a sheath is wrong. When the root cause of the ignorance that give rise to these three states is removed, then what was previously denigrated as a state of darkness, a state of ignorance, will shine as our own real nature. In other words, the explanations that are given that seem to concede the fact that sleep is a state of darkness, it's given for those who are not ready to grasp anything deeper. But if we go deeper in the practice, we will find more and more. We will find the superficial explanations unsatisfactory. We'll see through them. We'll see inconsistencies there. So we then when we think about it deeper, and if we question deeper, then we get given the deeper explanations.
This is like, and just put it in an analogy, see if I follow it correctly. Because this ego is a very tricky thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is deep sleep right here. But the ego is very, very funny because it puts the deep sleep in a box and now you don't see it.
Yeah.
This is a trick of ignorance, right?
Yeah.
Now we have to explain what deep sleep is, having put it in a box.
Yeah.
only until you really, well, a second, let me see for 1 minute what we're talking about,
Yeah.
that you can grasp the teachings.
All
Because
that,
all it's in the box, it's
yeah,
an imaginative idea.
yeah. All that shines in sleep is our own being, I am, which is shiny
Right.
even now. That's why Bhagavan often used to say, you're asleep even now.
Even now, yeah.
Because what sleep is nothing but the pure shining of I am. That's why he said sleep is your pure state. It's not a state of ignorance. There's full ignorance in waking and dream, and complete and pure knowledge in sleep.
Right.
That's
The
another
pure
thing. That's another thing I noticed in some of the comments on the various, because this video of Swami Sabha Priyananda and I discussing that, this has now appeared on various different YouTube channels. Some people have edited it and put a briefer version and so on. So a number of people have sent me links to saying, did you know that this has also appeared on such and such a channel? So I've also been reading some of the comments there. And one of the comments that some people have been making is that I am is ego. I am is ignorance. But I am is not the reality. Because they're so so accustomed to a certain way of thinking. This sort of confusion you get a lot in Nisargadatta about what is, sometimes Nisargadatta seems to say I am is the reality. Sometimes he seems to say it's the first thing to rise. But what does the term I am refer to? I am means I exist. So I am refers to our existence. Our existence is Brahman. Our existence is Sat, Sat-Chit. So when Bhagavan is very, very clear, ego is not I am. Ego is that same I am mixed and conflated with adjuncts as I am this body. So I am is the pure awareness. It's the awareness that is our own being. And that is what is shining in all three states.
Right.
But because people's minds are soaked in what they've read, that's why Sadhu Om often used to say, if you want to understand Bhagavan's teachings, you need to come with a fresh and open mind. You need to have a clean slate. He said, if you bring me a slate which is full of scribblings and ask me to write Bhagavan's beautiful name on that slate, first I have to wipe the slate clean and then write Bhagavan's name. Because if I write Bhagavan, and then you can see the beauty of his name. If instead of wiping the slate clean, if I just write his name over all the scribblings that's already there, his beautiful name will just become one among the many scribblings. Likewise with the mind. If our mind is filled with ideas that we've learned previously, and we try and understand Bhagavan's teaching through the filter of those already preconceived ideas, we will not understand Bhagavan's teachings correctly. Firstly, we need to be ready to set aside all our previous understandings and preconceptions and beliefs and everything. We need to come to Bhagavan with our mind needs to be a tabula rasa. It needs to be a clean slate, a blank piece of paper. Then only Bhagavan's teachings will take will make a deep impression upon us.
It's because too many people confuse, no, this meaning of I am, because
yes.
Nisargadatta usually refers to the first sense of I as a body.
Yeah, but that's not I am.
Yes.
I am is our existence. Our existence is the one thing that is certainly real. Nobody can doubt I exist. So how can anyone say I exist is ignorance? I exist is the one thing.
Without the Atma Buddhi. Without the Atma Buddhi.
Yes, without Dehatma Buddhi. But the Dehatma Buddhi is I am this body.
Yes.
But
But it,
I am is our existence. I am this body, or I am this or that or anything. Even I am Brahman. That is an identity. Identifying ourselves with anything other than I is a false identity. That's why Bhagavan said the ultimate truth is not even I am Brahman. Because so long as we use the word Brahman, we are thinking about something other than ourselves. Brahman is something very great, very vast. So we have to be told at first, I am Brahman, you are that, Tattvamasi. Why? Because till now we've been looking for something outside ourselves, some God or Brahman or jnana or happiness. We've been looking for these things outside ourselves. So we are told you are that. But the final experience is not I am Brahman. The final experience is I am I. That is Brahman. Brahman is that which shines in our heart as I am I, as Bhagavan said in that Sanskrit verse. Hridaya Guhara Madhye Kevalam Brahma Matram Hyam Aham Iti Kuta Atma-rupena. That is, Brahman is that which is shining as our own self in the form I am I. So
Yeah, but
I
that-
am I
that-
is our true identity. I am anything other than I is a false identity. Of course, it's true that I am Brahman because Brahman is I. So I is Brahman. But why to bring in, if Brahman is I, why to talk about Brahman? Why not just talk about I? The whole
Let's talk
purpose of the
about-
Mahavakyas is to turn our attention away from the idea of something outside ourselves. What we've been looking for outside, we ourselves are that. So we need to be investigating ourselves alone.
Can I ask a question related to
Yeah.
that? I am I. So I am, when we normally talk about I am Jose or I am a person,
Yeah.
the Jose is something that I'm aware of.
Yes.
It's something else.
Yeah.
And I am identifying A with B,
Yeah.
where what can be said of B cannot be said of A.
Yeah. Exactly.
I've already broken that equality there. So now we're trying to identify A with A.
Yes. Exactly.
But in order for me to identify anything with anything, I have to know that which I am identifying.
Yeah.
Because if I want to say that what's in this box is the same as it's in this other box, then so long if I don't know it, then I can't really identify it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think so when I say I am I, for me to identify myself as myself, I have to know myself.
Yes.
Which leads to the question, how to know myself? Can I know myself with the perception of anything else lingering? In other words, do I really have to isolate myself from anything else to know myself? Is it that I have to come to a point where I have to turn 180 degrees? Can I not know myself with that 179 degrees? Is that not enough?
No. No, it is not.
No.
Because
Okay.
as Bhagavan says in
Well-
verse 4 of Ulujunapadu, if oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If oneself is not a form, who can see their forms and how? So long as we are aware of anything other than ourselves, anything other than ourselves is a form. So long as we are aware of any form, however subtle it may be, we have already limited ourselves as a form. So in order
Because there has to be some perspective. There has to be some point of view from which I am seeing that.
Yes. To
And
see
I'm this, but
something,
not that.
to see something other than yourself, you must be other than that other thing.
Right.
So there's always, so long as you've got subject and object, you're in ignorance. So it's
Right.
but the state of pure awareness is the state that is beyond this dichotomy, this duality of subject and object. So that's why Bhagavan says, so long as we see the world, we don't see Swarupa, or Swarupa does not shine. When the world shines, Swarupa does not shine. When Swarupa shines, the world does not shine.
Right. That's because I still need to be in a position to be able
Yes.
to observe anything else.
You must have a
Okay.
point of view.
Right.
But
So that
in
brings,
pure awareness, there is no point. There's
no
just,
point.
I mean, there's no, that is a point is a limitation, but pure awareness is unlimited.
In other words, I have to be in a state where I have the absence of phenomenon of deep sleep, but at the same time, the wakefulness of the waking state.
Yes, yes, yes. It has to be said like that because it seems to us that sleep is a state of devoid of that awareness. But when we know that, we will recognize, oh, sleep was always shining in sleep. Sleep was never a state of ignorance.
It's full
But
of that.
from our perspective, sleep seems to be a state of darkness. So it has to be said like that.
When in fact it's full of light.
It's full of light, yes.
I have no further questions.
Yeah.
And
That is, we are superimposing our own darkness is ego. We as ego are superimposing our own darkness on sleep. But that
Right.
darkness is absent in sleep because ego is absent. So it's only from the perspective of waking and dream, of ego in waking and dream, that sleep seems to be a state of darkness. But sleep seems to be a state that comes and goes. Sleep never comes and goes. Sleep is our eternal state.
We're the ones who come and go.
Yeah, exactly. And if we
That's
investigate ourselves, we'll find that even we never came or went. We always are as we are. But now it has to be said, yes, we seem to come and go.
Right.
The incredible is that when you are in sleep, in the deep sleep, and ego is not eradicate, no?
Yes.
You are not conscious of your consciousness. The state of jnana, no, is the Jagrat Sushupti, no, that you mentioned before, no?
Yes.
When you
When you say you're not aware of your consciousness, who is not aware?
Yeah, no, always you are aware of our consciousness, no?
Yes.
But the absolutely clearness, no?
Yes.
The absolutely clear that you are that without
Yes.
the interruption of this elevation of this
Yeah.
ego, no? When from the perspective of ego, you are going to the deep sleep.
Yeah.
You only can try when you wake up again in the morning to remember that you descansar, you
rest.
you rest. Thank you. You rest absolutely. No, you feel rest.
Yes.
You feel clear.
Yeah.
You know that you continue 16, no? About
Yeah.
But this difference of the perception, and perception is not the correct word, no? Of you are absolutely that
Yes.
without ego is very different from the idea that we can explain about this absolutely absence of experience in the real Satchitananda, that your real nature. I don't know if I'm explaining very well.
It's not very clear to me. I'm sorry.
I try to say in Spanish, and
Yes,
Carlos,
yes.
if you are so
Yes.
kind to translate me.
Yeah.
Digamos que en el sueño profundo, mientras este ego no ha sido erradicado,
In deep sleep, so long as this ego hasn't been eradicated,
uno no es plenamente consciente de que uno siempre ha sido plenamente consciente de sí mismo.
one is not fully aware that one has been always fully aware of oneself as it is, as what we are.
And when the Sahaya Nirvikalpa Samadhi occurs,
Bueno,
así, perdón, que cuando ocurre el Sahaya Nirvikalpa Samadhi, tú estás absolutamente claro.
When Sahaja Nirvikalpa Samadhi occurs, you are absolutely clear
de que tú siempre has sido eso,
that you have always been that,
y que no hay otra cosa aparte de eso.
and that there is nothing else besides that.
Solo hay existencia,
That there is only existence
conciencia eterna,
or eternal consciousness,
sin espacio ni tiempo ni nada.
without space or time or anything else.
Pero la percepción del sueño profundo de quien no ha llegado a morir en vida, como este ego,
The perception of deep sleep for one who hasn't been able to die in life as this ego
no deja de ser, en cierto grado,
is to a certain extent only
una percepción mezclada de, sí, sé que no he estado desaparecido, que no he desaparecido,
mixed perception of oneself being that I haven't disappeared.
pero no he estado plenamente consciente de ser consciente.
Sorry, I have disappeared, but I haven't been fully aware of being aware.
Right. Okay. I think that the best way to think of this is there are two possible points of view. One point of view is the real point of view. That is the point of view of Swarupa. Swarupa means our own real nature. From the perspective of Swarupa, there is never anything other than Swarupa. So there's no changing states or anything. There's just that pure awareness. From the perspective of ego, there are three states: waking, dream, and sleep. In two of those three states, we are aware of ourselves and we are aware of other things. In the third state, namely sleep, it seems to us, and unless we think about it carefully, it seems to us that we're not aware of anything in sleep. It is true in a sense we're not aware of anything in sleep, but we are aware. We're aware of our own being. That which is aware of its own existence in sleep is only Swarupa, because ego is completely absent there. When we rise as ego, because ego is a conflation of two elements of the pure awareness I am and the adjuncts, namely this body. So we recognize when we wake up, I slept. So when we say I slept, that means we existed in a state called sleep. But who was it who existed in that sleep? It wasn't ego. Ego was completely non-existent in sleep. What existed in sleep is only Swarupa. But because Swarupa is the reality of ego, ego claims that existence but was in sleep as its own existence. Yes, I slept. I existed in sleep. So we as ego, we lay claim to the existence but shone in sleep. But that existence was not our existence as ego, but our existence as Swarupa, which is the reality of ego. So that is why from the perspective of ego in the waking and dream state, we're able to recognize that we existed in sleep. But we are not able to we are able to recognize our existence in sleep, but not our identity in sleep. Why we cannot recognize our identity in sleep? Because ego obscures our identity now. Our identity in sleep is exactly the same as our real identity now. But our real identity, which is I am I, is obscured by ego the false awareness, I am this body. So we from the perspective of ego, it seemed we existed in sleep, but we didn't know anything. But so there's our view of, when we view sleep from a perspective of ego, there's an inherent confusion there. Because we're recognizing that we existed, but existed as what? We didn't exist as ego, we existed only as Swarupa. And as Swarupa, it was a state of pure awareness. But because we are now identified with ego, it seems to us, no, we weren't aware in sleep. So there's sleep. The ego's point of view, ego's view is always confused. Just like we're now confused about what we are now, we are confused also now about what we were in sleep.
Yes.
Though what shone in sleep was only Swarupa.
But for example, Michael, when we say that the consciousness is indivisible, no? In device, no?
Divided.
Divided, no? It's not possible to fragment.
Consciousness is never divided.
Never.
Consciousness seems to be divided when we rise as ego. But division begins with ego.
Only seems to be divided in the
Yes.
in the rise of ego, no?
Yes. It's divided as subject and objects.
Yes, for that reason, when ego arise, and you say that ego is composed for two elements, no? The panchakosas and the consciousness, I am, no? This apparent combination that this Chidabhasa is only an illusion, because the consciousness or the Sat-Chit never can separate from itself and mix with other things.
Exactly.
This is very, very, very subtle, because
it is subtle. It is subtle.
Sometimes I heard me explain, for example, no?
Yes.
That the elevation of ego is the result of this phantom without form takes the properties of consciousness, of Sat-Chit, properties, because the consciousness is divided, take the properties to invent simulation of identity composed of these two elements that we're saying.
Yes.
But this is not absolutely correct. The absolutely correct is what we were saying before, no? That the consciousness is all the time undivided.
Yes.
And the ego creates a simulation of a mix of consciousness with panchakosas.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, it's impossible, this mix.
Yeah.
It's all an appearance of mix.
Here's the thing, though.
Ego is inherently contradictory, because as Bhagavan said, ego is chit, jada, granti. It's a conflation of chit and jada. When we say, I am this body, we are identifying what is aware with what is not aware. So ego is radically confused. So all knowledge that ego has is a confusion. So we are able to recognize that confusion, but in order to be free of that confusion, we need to know ourselves as we actually are. We need to know and to be Swarupa. We need to know and to be what we actually are.
Comes to me
Until then, there's inevitably confusion. That's why when we try to understand these things with our intellect can only take us so far, but we always come up against paradoxes, contradictions, and so on. So how is any of this intellectual or conceptual knowledge of any use when the very foundation of all conceptual knowledge is confusion? How can this conceptual knowledge be of any use to us? It is useful to us only to the extent to which it points us in the in the right direction. The right direction is to turn our outward going mind back within to know ourselves. So all of this, these phenomena and ego and phenomena can never be explained perfectly because there will always be contradictions. But we need to understand enough to understand what is the way of getting out of this confusion. So long as we're in the confusion, there'll be contradictions inevitable. How to get out of this confusion, that is the way shown by Bhagavan. By turning our attention, now our attention is going out towards phenomena. This same attention that is going out towards phenomena needs to turn back within towards the underlying reality of the, needs to turn away from objects back towards the reality of the subject. Back towards our being.
One word that Ernesto said is simulation, and I don't think that's a proper term. Because when I say I am Jose, I'm not simulating an identity with Jose. I'm not simulating I'm Jose. But deeply, I know I'm not Jose. But I'm just going to simulate this real quick.
But however we explain this, it's going to be an imperfect explanation. So when he said it's a simulation, that's one way of viewing it, but it's no way we explain it is going to be entirely satisfactory.
When we experience fear of when I feel this body's dying,
yeah.
If I feel this body's dying, I don't want to be able to snap out of simulation and say, you know what, I was never this body, so I'm here in this hospital. Let's go here real quick.
Jose, you know what I am thinking, for example, if you take a glasses of virtual classes, for example, no? These virtual glasses, and you suddenly see that you are a gladiator in Roma fighting with other gladiator, no? And you are absolutely convinced that you are this gladiator.
Right.
This illusion that you are this gladiator is an apparent mix of your consciousness of Jose with the body of the gladiator, but you all the time are Jose. You're real in this example. You with these glasses, feeling yourself as a gladiator because you are seeing the lions and the other gladiator, and we are fighting. In this simulation, you appear the two elements, that the consciousness and the gladiator. But what is your real identity in this illusion? You are Jose.
Right, but that leaves out the strength with which I grasp Jose. So I grasp Jose very strongly. Yeah. I don't do it very lightly. The gladiator I can leave out because I don't really care about the gladiator. But Jose, I grasp it very strongly.
Yeah,
that's what I have to stop doing. Stop identifying with Jose implies that this force with which I grasp him has to decrease to a point where I can see I'm not Jose. So I mean, in other words, I'm leaving Jose.
Yeah.
Just grasp. If someone tells me I have cancer, I'm going to be devastated. Okay, I know intellectually this is not real. It's a simulation. So long as I grasp Jose so strongly, and I'm this person, I will feel I'm dying.
Because your strongly identity with Jose impose or prevail respect the other.
So you can call it a radical ignorance or illusion, but I think simulation is a little bit of
Can I suggest a reconciliation? That is what Ernesto is saying. It is an analogy. Analogies all have their limitation. Because in that analogy, though you may be wearing these glasses and seeing yourself as a gladiator, all the time you know, but you're not a gladiator, you're Jose. This is all just a simulation. So there's only the identification with the gladiator is a very superficial identification. But like any analogy, no analogy is perfect. For instance, the snake rope analogy. The snake rope analogy, you need a third person. That is, the snake isn't seeing it, the rope isn't seeing itself as a snake, and the snake isn't seeing itself as a rope. There has to be someone else who is seeing it. So the snake rope analogy is a very useful analogy, but we shouldn't take it too far. So the analogy that Ernesto gives, it's okay up to a point, but you're pointing out the limitations of the analogy. Yes, all analogies have limitations, because this is, though in a sense this is a simulation, this is a simulation that is such a convincing simulation. We are completely, as you say, when you're wearing those glasses and seeing yourself as a gladiator, a lion may jump on you and begin mauling you, or another gladiator may stick his sword in you. That is not playfully. You may react to that, but you know it's not real. Whereas if it happens to you, as Jose, as you say, if someone tells you you've got cancer, then it's very, very real. So it's the analogy, but Ernesto gives is okay as an analogy. We just shouldn't take it too far.
How about Don Quixote, Michael? See, Don Quixote, you probably know the classic Spanish book by Cervantes. It was a man 500 years ago who thought himself to be a knight.
Yes. Don Quixote.
Went crazy.
Yeah.
So windmills that looked like giants and so on. He really thought he would have to save a princess and no, I mean, it obviously has the limitation too.
But the utility that I find in this analogy is conform we attend ourselves more profound and more keenly and with more love, in any moment, your perception of yourself as Jose, or as Ernesto, as Michael, or Carlos, will be similar to the gladiator.
Yeah.
Respect what we really are.
Yes.
Now it's very strongly our identity, and don't appear as a simulation, appear as I am Jose, I'm Ernesto, no?
Yeah.
But conform we attend yourself, gradually, what is now in a second plan will be in the first plan of what we are. No? And the idea that I am this body and the perception of this body will be very crushed, very inconsistently. No?
So just to use your analogy, if we are so caught up, that is, it's all a simulation. We've got the glasses on and we see. But if you get yourself completely caught up in that, you may be beginning to fear the lions and the other gladiators, because you allow yourself to get so strongly identified with that simulation, that simulated identity. When you are so strongly identified, what is the only way out of that? You have to turn your attention away from this simulated identity of I am a gladiator, back to your previous identity, I am Jose or I am Ernesto or whoever. So we can use that analogy also to show in our present state what, in order to get out, now we are caught up in this simulation that is with which we are so strongly identified, we seem unable to separate ourselves. But there is a way. The way is to turn our attention back towards ourselves. That is, we are the one who have entered that, and we are the only way to get out of that. So it's only by going back within ourselves that we can escape this false identity, but we've now allowed ourselves to get caught up in.
Now, if I'm a gladiator in this simulated reality, but in this, if in this gladiator, you give me a house and a nice swimming pool, it's all simulated, it's a virtual reality, but if it's a house and there's a crowd of people who praise me, and I'm doing amazing with so much money in this simulated money, but it's still virtual. I don't know, I can't really tell. So it's all great for me as a gladiator that I seem to be.
Yeah.
And if I let myself to be swayed by all these praises, and by all these beautiful things around me, even the gladiator will be difficult for me to let go as ego.
Yeah.
Because I grasp things.
Yeah.
Even the gladiator, then I'll have to undergo a sadhana with the simulation itself to let go of the simulation, to come back, as Jose. Because it's so awesome to be a gladiator.
Yeah.
In my view.
Yeah.
This is all my own happiness because none of this is happening.
Yeah.
But the more I let myself to go towards the world, whether it's virtual reality or dream or whatever, the more difficult it is to snap out what I take myself to be in it.
Yeah, but the point I was trying to make is, so long as you're in that simulation, there's no way out of that simulation outside yourself. You cannot escape from that simulation. There's no, wherever you search outside, you're not going to find an escape. The only escape route from that simulation is back through yourself. Because only when you turn back to yourself, then you, oh, I'm not a gladiator, I'm just Jose, so you escape. But obviously, we are not switching in this Atma-vichara, we are not switching from one false identity to another false identity. We are trying to see what we actually are. Who am I?
Yeah, but you know what will happen?
That is the only way of escape. The only way we can get out of this trouble we've got ourselves in is by going back within.
Right, but you know what will happen? Once I have my VR goggles and I'm like, am I really this gladiator that I seem to be? Because I'm doing so well in this unreal reality, I will, who am I? Am I this gladiator and then my mind will pop into some other thought.
Yeah,
but I have to go to my swimming pool tomorrow, so what am I going to do? I have to fight the next gladiator. And then, but wait a minute, am I really this gladiator? I thought I was, no, but tomorrow I have to go and fight this other king in this other kingdom because...
Once you're fully identified with that role, with that identity, you're unwilling to give it up. This is the difficulty we face now. Turning our attention back within to see what we actually are is not difficult. As Bhagavan says, it's the easiest of all things. But why it seems to us to be so difficult? Because of our reluctance to give up this false identity. We are so caught up in this false identity that this false identity is ourself, it seems to us. Who am I? I'm Michael. So why should I don't want to let go of Michael because Michael is myself. So this is where the bhakti and vairagya are absolutely essential. I must firstly lose that desire to continue as Michael, and I must have love to know who am I. Actually, those two are one and the same. To the extent to which I have love to know who I actually am, I will, to that extent, I will detach myself from this false identity, I am Michael.
I have read that Sylvester Stallone sometimes speak like Rambo. It's very, very common, no? That actors that interpret a character too many times speaks, including his families, as this character, no?
Yeah.
With our idea of what we are, the idea of Michael, of Jose, of Carlos. So this idea is like this music recording in the last cassettes. Too many when we record some song of a radio 10 10 or 20 times above of the same music is a noise that you forget what you really are very strongly, no?
Yeah.
Now, Michael, if I do a sadhana, back to the virtual reality thing, if I do a sadhana in the virtual reality to let go of the gladiator, and I finally snap back into Jose, I was, Jesus, I was really attached to all that wealth as a gladiator, because of the vairagya that I already cultivated in the virtual reality. That vairagya, it stays in my heart to now help me let go of Jose. Is that, or not necessarily so?
The reason, if you in your, let's even leave this simulated reality, let's say in dream, we can see this sometimes in dream. In a dream, if you try to practice self-attentiveness in a dream, you will often find your way, as soon as you try to turn your attention back to yourself, if you really do so, you will wake up. But you'll wake up in this state.
Yeah.
That is because the strength of our identity with the dream body is less strong than the strength of our identity with this body. So though that identity dissolves, this identity remains intact. That is why Bhagavan sometimes said, the reason people sometimes ask, you say waking and dream are one and the same, but why is it in waking state, things are very consistent. Things seem to happen in a logical way. If you're now in a certain city, you don't suddenly next minute find yourself in some other city. But in dream, you may be dreaming 1 minute that you're in Madrid, and next minute you're in Delhi or somewhere. So why is it that the dreams they seem to be less stable than this waking state? When people ask Bhagavan this, he said it all depends on the strength of your identification. Some dreams are very unstable like this. You 1 minute you're talking to someone who may be your father or someone, and suddenly it's some friend of yours, or that is so. The scenes keep on sort of shape-shifting. That is because in such dreams, our identification with the dream body is not so strong. But in other dreams, things seem to be far more consistent because we are more strongly identified. But the identification with this body is stronger than our identification with any body in a dream, because those dreams are dreams within the dream of our life as this person. So this is, as it were, a more fundamental identification. So whereas we are able to give up the identification with the dream body relatively easily, giving up identification with this body is more difficult.
Right.
So though you, in a dream, if you attend to yourself, you may wake up, but the same strength of self-attentiveness will not take you to your real state.
Right. This is why I mentioned the virtual reality, because in the virtual reality, I don't necessarily snap out of it.
Yeah.
So I'm dependent on the computer to snap out.
Yeah.
So, so if whatever vairagya, so in other words, whatever vasanas I can surrender in the virtual reality, I guess what I'm saying is the group of vasanas, the vasanas that I employ to experience the virtual reality and the dream and the waking state, they all come from the same place, namely my heart.
Yeah.
So whatever vairagya I can accomplish in so if I surrender, say, I have so many women in the virtual reality or whatever, this is all virtual, so it doesn't mean so, but then I surrender that. Just, this is not true happiness. I don't like this way of living. Just gonna let go of this. Snap out of virtual reality, come back as Jose. I don't think that as Jose, I'm just going to pull out a new set of asanas because I have already surrendered that in this virtual reality. And then I dream, I don't think I'm going to dream that, because as a dream, I have to pull it from my vasanas. But those vasanas have been surrendered to a certain extent.
Yes,
A
but
lot.
we don't. We may be able to snap out of it, but we haven't actually given up those vasanas.
Okay, that's what was my
but
point.
that all that happens, that is the deeper we go in this spiritual path, the weaker the vasanas become. But the vasanas are not destroyed until their root, ego, is destroyed.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
it's not that we give up our vasanas one by one.
They weaken, but they don't fully
yeah.
They get destroyed. I see. That is a very important point. I see.
Yeah.
There is an apparent gradually reduce of the strong of our vasanas. Meanwhile, the purification of our mind, no, is going.
Yeah.
The
weakening of the vasanas is itself the purification of the mind, but the vasanas are the impurities in the mind.
Now,
Yes.
regarding the weakening, is it, if I weaken it in the virtual reality, it's then I'm going to waking state as a, because they're weakened, at least it will be easier for me to not get swayed by it.
Yes, in a way you can say that. Yeah. Because really, it doesn't matter whether it's this state, or whether it's a dream, or whether it's a simulated reality. It's all ultimately, all mental activity is a play of our vasanas.
Got it. Okay.
So to the extent to, how do we weaken our Vishaya vasanas? We weaken our Vishaya vasanas to the extent to which we hold on to ourselves. Because vasanas are strengthened when we allow ourselves to be swayed by them. They're weakened when we don't allow ourselves to be swayed by them. So the only way to avoid being swayed by any Vishaya vasana is to cling to self-attentiveness. So when we are clinging to self-attentiveness, we are not just weakening one or two vasanas. We are weakening Vishaya vasanas collectively.
In general.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, perfect. Yeah, as the point I was going to make is that although the weakening is not the absolute destruction, there is still much value in the weakening.
Oh yes, absolutely. That's what the spiritual path is all about. We progress in this spiritual path only by weakening our Vishaya vasanas, and to the extent to which we weaken our Vishaya vasanas, our Sat vasana is strengthened. That is the same self-attentiveness by which we are weakening our Vishaya vasanas, we are also strengthening our Sat vasana.
Correct.
And Michael, going back to what you said earlier about the different explanations given to different people, as you explained that Sadhu Om used to do.
Yes.
Usually it's, I don't know if I hear it in this way or I understand it in this way, but usually it's like Sadhu Om certainly writes this in somewhere in the book. I don't remember exactly when, but he equates the ability to take in a deeper explanation with the maturity of mind.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Why is only, I mean, the ability to take in that explanation, why is that a sign of, because can it be just like a, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. I'm going to follow, but
deeper explanations are, as a general rule, deeper explanations are also simpler explanations. So whether we are able to grasp an explanation doesn't depend upon our intellectual acumen. It depends upon our willingness to accept a simple explanation. Many people just aren't willing. Their minds are complicated. They don't want to, the simple explanation doesn't satisfy them. So for them, more complex and roundabout explanations, superficial explanations have to be given, because that alone will satisfy them.
It's a matter of our will, actually.
You don't have to,
The moment you accept an explanation, the implications of the explanation, I mean, we are supposed to understand the implications, because when we hear Bhagavan's more radical teachings, we are, in a way, that has an effect on our will, that, okay, that means, that implies, you know, all my likes, or my dislikes, or my attachments, or my, to this world are to be surrendered.
See a very simple teaching that Bhagavan gives us. Verse 26 of Uludunapadu. If ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. What can be a simpler teaching than that? It is so simple. But I've come across so many people who just are not able to grasp that. They say, well, no, Bhagavan wouldn't have meant it like that. Because it's not that it's a difficult idea to understand, it's that an idea that most people are unwilling to accept. And so they'll try and read some other meaning into it. No, Bhagavan wouldn't have meant like this. He would have meant that other things are known only when we rise as ego. It doesn't mean that other things exist, but he very clearly says the words he uses, if ego comes into existence, the hande undayen, that means if it comes into existence, everything comes into existence. And then he even more explicitly, if ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. He couldn't be more explicit about it. And it's an extremely simple teaching, but it's far too radical for most people to accept. Even most among Bhagavan's teaching, Bhagavan's devotees won't be ready to accept it, because one of the implications of that is that there's only one ego. Because if you have many egos, then but that verse makes no sense. That verse makes sense only if there's one ego, because he talks about ego and everything. So the multiplicity comes into existence only when the one comes into existence. And when the one doesn't exist, the multiple doesn't exist. The one being ego and the multiplicity being everything else. So there's no room in that verse for us to interpret it as multiple egos. But for most people, they're just not able to get their head around it.
Well, because then that'd be metaphysical solipsism.
Sorry?
Then that would be solipsism.
Yeah. And most people
The
just
mind
aren't
has
willing
this
to accept
protection
that.
against solipsism.
Yeah, it's the radicality of the. It's not only an intellectual thing that why you are able to accept.
It is radical. But why is it radical? Because I'm so attached to so many things. But if I wasn't attached to any of this, what does it matter if it's real or not?
Bhagavan put it very simply in Guru Vachaka Kavai. There's a verse in which Bhagavan says, those who foist reality upon the world are like an infatuated lover who foists chastity upon a prostitute.
Right. And then it seems very radical to tell for the person that here's, hey, your wife is, it's radical to the person. He's so attached to the wife. If he wasn't attached to the really? Oh, I just think I know now. It's a total attachment.
So this is why Bhagavan said bhakti is the mother of jnana. Bhakti means love. So ultimately, jnana is our own real nature. It's always available to it if we like it. Why we haven't lost ourselves in jnana yet? Because we still are not. We still don't have sufficient love for it. We have too much love for other things.
So for these things.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because why do I want Jose? I want Jose because through Jose I can get so many things.
Yeah.
If you take all of these things from Jose, well, I'm not gonna say myself. That'd be too much messed up. But if you take some person
even if you had nothing, supposing you were the poorest man in the world, supposing you were a slave, having to work 18 hours a day, or even more, 20 hours a day, barely getting enough food, enough sleep, your whole life is misery. You still wouldn't be willing to give it up.
To give up the body, no. But
Yeah.
some people commit suicide when they
Yeah, but
lose, when they have big losses.
Yes,
Because
but
they had the body to have the things. The things are gone now. I'm not gonna stick with this body anymore because I wanted that.
yes,
This strong bastard caused them suffering. And they, I was gonna kill myself because
But-
I was here for this,
but because they still, that is, suicide is not a state of vairagya.
No, it's not. But what
Because
you say is the
they're
opposite
still
of vairagya.
seeking happiness in something other than themselves.
Well,
If we have
right,
vairagya, it shouldn't matter to us about this,
Shouldn't
whether
matter,
body
shouldn't.
exists or not. Let it appear or let it not appear. It's nothing to do with me if we have true vairagya. So it's
Well,
again,
suicide.
it is desire that leads to suicide. Desire and attachment.
Suicide, and I hope this doesn't get brought down by YouTube's algorithm, but suicide is the opposite. In this form of suicide, I'm not just going to
Yeah.
call all suicide.
Body side.
But body side, in this manner,
Yeah.
it's the opposite of vairagya.
Yeah, it is. It is.
It's direct opposite.
It's direct opposite. Yeah. The suicide that we are aiming for is not the death of the body. The body is innocent. Bhagavan said, if you punish the body, it's like Bhagavan said about people who do physical austerities or what. He said, it's like if a person has done a wrong and you beat the chair they're sitting on. The chair is innocent. Likewise, his body is innocent. His body has never done anything wrong. The wrongdoer is ego. So it is ego that needs to die.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a vairagya that is not dependent on anything external, obviously.
Yes, yes.
Like the one you mentioned during the talk with, what was it called? It was like smasana vairagya or something.
Smasana vairagya. Smasana means the cremation ground.
Yeah, like dependent on any condition or any circumstance of life. Yeah, it has to be like regardless of what we're living.
Yeah.
Whatever circumstances are given in life, there will be vairagya. That is the one which is required. Yeah.
Yeah. So vairagya is gold.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
The true vairagya is gold. It's the greatest treasure.
Mm-hmm.
Greatest treasure.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you want to add
Bhakti and vairagya are actually one and the same thing.
Love for God.
Because the love to know ourselves, the flip side of the love to know ourselves is the freedom from desire to know other things. So long as we have desire to know or to experience anything other than ourselves, our love to know ourselves is deficient.